Welcome to No More Mondays, the podcast that helps you navigate career challenges through the wisdom of professionals who have been at the same crossroads. I'm your host, Angie Callan, and I welcome you to join me each week as I chat with leaders, entrepreneurs, and employees who are here to share practical, tactical advice and some inspiration on how they arrived at career satisfaction. From job searching and career changes to going out on your own, we're breaking down barriers and providing actionable takeaways to help you take charge of your Mondays and ditch the Sunday blues. Welcome to the No More Mondays movement. Hello, and welcome to No More Mondays. I'm your host, Angie Callan. Corporate culture is a hot topic in all markets today. From DEI initiatives to workplace safety and mental health, leaders have a lot to think about when building teams and creating an environment where people want to work and can thrive. I applaud today's guests for doing just that. Jennifer Tescher not only grew a 70-person strong nonprofit from the ground up, but she has done it while keeping people front of mind. Her own sabbatical became the catalyst to how she has shaped the corporate culture of financial health networks while also making some big waves in national financial policy. Here to share with us how she builds healthy teams who support her vision and drive the mission to improve financial health for all, help me welcome to the show, Jennifer Tescher. Jennifer, welcome to No More Mondays.
Thanks for having me, Angie.
So I want to kick things off because we were kind of talking about before the show, there's a lot of different directions we could take this. So I'm excited to just see where Jennifer and I go together today. But I would love to hear a little bit more about your work at Financial Health Networks and kind of what you're helping to do through this organization that you founded.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Financial Health Network it'll be 20 years old next year. Pretty crazy.
Congratulations.
And thank you. Our mission is to promote financial health for all, improve financial health for all. And we do that by working with companies and organizations to help them understand the financial health challenges of their customers, their employees, their communities, and to help them develop and deliver solutions to improve it in ways that are also going to be beneficial for those companies' bottom lines.
So how did you identify the need for this kind of work? Because it's a nonprofit organization. You founded it, have grown it from the ground up over the last 20 years. I'm curious if you can rewind back to the early days. What inspired you to get into this type of work, and what triggered oh man, there's a need for this?
Yeah. So I'm going to try to condense a long story and to make it podcast sized. I am a former journalist. I have undergraduate and graduate degrees in journalism. I worked at the Charlotte Observer. This is the last thing on earth I imagined I would be doing. And I would say that underneath my early desire to be a journalist is my curiosity and my question ask. I'm a questioner. I want to know why, not just any question. Why is generally my question. Why is it this way? And I generally ask the why question in the service of justice. Why are things this way? And why are some people better off than others? And that was a really motivating idea for me when I went into journalism. And 20 years ago, journalism looked a lot different than it does today.
Yes, it does.
It was still, little guy fighting against, power.
And print newspapers.
And print, that's what I did, right? So that's really what drew me to journalism. And then I went to get a graduate degree in public policy and decided pretty shortly thereafter that I didn't just want to write about the issues, I wanted to do something about them. But I had never considered doing anything else. And I did a bunch of jobs and internships around town, et cetera, et cetera. And I ended up at the nation's first community development bank called Shore Bank. And Shore Bank doesn't exist anymore. But at the time, it was the first institution to help demonstrate this idea that a company, a for-profit company, could make money and do good at the same time. So it wasn't like they were making money over here, making loans and stuff, and then over here they were donating it to charity. No, the bank was making loans and investments in predominantly African-American communities that had suffered from white flight and had been de-invested, and was demonstrating that business could be done in these communities safely, responsibly, that would be good for that community and good for the borrowers and good for the bank. I didn't know anything about banking. I'd never considered working at a bank, but Shore Bank was so much more than just a bank. And that idea that balancing mission and margin every day, like that was super interesting to me intellectually. And so there's another 8 years that passed where I do a variety of things at the bank. And the thing I was always really interested in were people who either did not have a bank account or who were making use of check cashers and payday lenders and other sorts of non-bank entities. And I got approached by the Ford Foundation to ultimately create what is now, what was at the time the Center for Financial Services Innovation and what is now known as the Financial Health Network. So there's been quite an evolution in my own career. And then what I haven't talked about yet, but won't because I've been talking for too long, is the evolution from CFSI and financial innovation to now a focus on financial health.
Well, don't worry, because I'm going to ask about that actually. So you're a step ahead of me. But there's a couple things you mentioned just in your own journey that I want to point out and would love you to just speak to a little bit more. Sure. As we, as I think about who's listening out there, people who are, trying to figure out how to get into a more purposeful or more enjoyable career, maybe start businesses or something along those lines. And what I think is really interesting about you is whoever knew when you studied and even worked as a journalist that this is where you would end up. But that foundation definitely impacts how you conduct business. And so the message I want to send is like, don't ever assume where you start is where you're going to go and where you're going to land. However, just because it might seem irrelevant, it's not. And I would just, that's a bunch of like little random thoughts that I'd love for you to just kind of dig into a little bit and speak to.
Totally. I mentor students at the policy school at University of Chicago at the Harris School. And I think I'm on my 5th or 6th student. And every student wants to know, what's the right first job that I should take? And boy, that first job, it's so, so important because, oh my God, if I pick wrong, like I'm stuck on some track. And I always am amused, not only because I obviously blew past that, but because the world, it makes it so much easier to change careers constantly in a way that wasn't true. Especially now than it was 20 years ago. Right. That's what I'm saying. I tell new grads all the time, you're not signing a death sentence. You just have to get started. Exactly. And no one looks at your resume twice if you every couple of years have done something different. That wouldn't have been cool 20 years ago. Right. So I put a lot less stock, a lot less faith in here is the perfect path, or there even is a path. And it doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want and think that you're going to be able to climb the ladder. You have to be realistic. But I think that there is a lot of room to explore and to be thinking about what are the key hard skills that I can gain along the way that might then be useful in other arenas. I say this a lot on the show. I think it's good to have a general wayfinding point that you're working towards. For instance, I want to grow my career in this type of way, but there's a lot of different solutions to meet those, I'm going to say, general goals. And if you've got a super tunnel visioned goal in mind, like Jennifer 20 years ago, or when you started journalism, if you'd have said, I want to be the editor-in-chief of a magazine, and you had hard-nosed your way towards that goal, you would have completely missed the opportunity to partner with Ford to create an organization that is now 20 years old and 70 staff strong, which is exactly what I kind of want to talk about. But that's why if you have a tunnel vision goal, you might miss a door that opens on the way that progresses that goal in a way you didn't know. And that's exactly what you kind of embraced early on in your career. That's true. Now, I would say I embraced it, not even realizing that I was, right? It's one of the most frustrating things about getting older is that on the one hand, you gain more experience, more wisdom, more confidence. But on the other hand, like you wish you had those things earlier, but that's just not how it works, right? That's not how life works. So I sometimes am frustrated by that, but I'm glad it's turned out okay so far.
So talk to me a little bit more about the evolution of what is now Financial Health Network and what it's been like to grow and evolve that organization into, I mean, it's a 70-person nonprofit is a decent sized nonprofit, everybody. That is not a tiny little operation. It's significant. So tell me about that experience over the last 20 years since it was first founded.
So we were founded originally to answer the question of how can technological change in financial services benefit those who need it the most? So this was 2004. So let's think about what was going on in 2004. That was the year that Google went public. That was the year that Mark Zuckerberg invented the Facebook in his dorm. It's the year that iTunes, I think, sold its billionth song, right? So this phone thing that we all have in our hands or right next to us didn't exist yet. But already, because of the internet and other technologies, it was becoming clear that there was an opportunity to reach and serve lower income people with financial services in a way that had been hard up until then from a cost perspective. And so that's kind of where we started. And before there was this thing called fintech, we were identifying innovators who were thinking about new and different ways of using technology to reach and serve different people. So our focus back then was really on the un- and underbanked. We helped to put those ideas and those populations on the map. We did some of the most formative early research around those populations. We made some of the earliest investments in innovators in that arena. And then we brought together very large financial services companies who wanted to sort of work on this issue in their own businesses. And then something happened. Well, actually, a few things happened. The first is that the iPhone was invented in 2007. And so you could say we had been focused on basic access to financial services. And, this device kind of made access ubiquitous. Not overnight and not exactly, but, that was going to be a big solution to the problem. Then that's the second thing that happened was the financial crisis.
I had a feeling that was second. I had a feeling that was coming into play here.
Yeah. Maybe those financial products and services that we thought were so good for people, maybe they weren't. And then the third thing was the Great Recession, when we all collectively realized that this was not just a poor person problem, an unbanked problem. This is like millions of Americans, the majority actually of Americans that were struggling financially. And we missed it. We missed it because we were gathering the wrong data and because it had been 30 years in the making. And so it was really at that point that we made the pivot to thinking more broadly about financial health.
I think it's really interesting that you were adaptable to, I'm going to say, market conditions and societal changes that were in real time, not only impacting that target market, but helping you understand what kind of impacts those changes have. And I was just kind of anecdotally, I graduated from college in 2003. So it was, we were a little shaky. We were a little shaky economically at that point. But I remember as an independent adult, these milestones happening to me. And when all of a sudden, okay, technology is booming. I'm now out of college and I get Facebook, like all these different things, and tuning into how those give us different access and change our needs and also reveal the needs that we have, like feels very relevant to what I can remember at the time. And so I'm curious for you, how you've seen that kind of real-time evolution of the business that aligned with whatever changes were coming at you. Like, how has that helped you impact in this space?
Yeah. So I think it is really difficult to build the plane while you're flying it, right? Everyone says that. And I think one of the key ideas that I've used in sort of building and leading the organization is that we really should be a learning organization. Because in a way, we have been putting forth ideas and I will call them hypotheses that were totally new, that we were inventing as we were going. And we were really challenging people to think differently. So yes, we wanted them to do differently, but first we had to get them to think differently. This is where my journalism training comes in, right? I ask really good questions. I know a lot. I know a little bit about a lot of things.
It all comes full circle, everybody.
Exactly. Why is it this way, right? And so I think it's really important to be humble in what you do know and then in what you don't know, and be willing and ready to change, to pivot, to evolve as you learn from the work that you're doing. And so when we pivoted the organization and then ultimately renamed it, certainly we spent a lot of time thinking about how to communicate that and how will our existing stakeholders feel about that. But the fact is, we had been bringing people along the whole way with us. So I think there were a lot of people out there who said, wow, that was really brave of you for pivoting. Because I think for some people it suggests, oh, maybe what we were doing before was incorrect. Or, I think what we were doing in the beginning was the right thing at the time. And as we learned more, right, it was time to move on. And so as an example, the un- and underbanked was a really big area of focus for us. And today, because of our work, the FDIC became mandated by Congress to survey the un- and underbanked every 2 years. And as a result of that, the FDIC took it on to really do the work to help dramatically reduce the percentage of the unbanked in this country. And it is down from a high of around 8%. Now we're down to less than 5% in the country, but it's been 20 years in the making, right? So that's the other thing that is important is when you're trying to make change at this magnitude, changing the way people think and the ideas that underpin them, it's a really long game, a really long game. And so, the other trick is how do you keep staff, funders, others, how do you keep them energized? And how do you help them see the small wins along the way so that they can stay with what is a very long game?
Because there's this idea of patience, like systemic change does not happen overnight. And even at a very kind of little funny anecdotal micro level, that applies to you if you're trying to change something that's significant in your life. Trying to change careers doesn't happen overnight. Trying to change your financial health, since that is kind of a little bit of a common theme we're talking about, doesn't happen overnight. But I imagine for you, it has got to be incredibly rewarding to look back and say the 20 years has been worth it, because I have a specific metric that shows that 20 years has been worth it.
Yeah. We just had we brought our staff all together last week in Chicago, and because we're gearing up for our 20th anniversary and we're now working on a strategic plan for the next chapter, it's time to really think about how to talk about the last 20 years and the change that's happened. And that's not an easy thing to summarize 20 years of impact in a way that feels tangible and meaningful, but also captures the full sweep. And especially these last 20 years, think about how much the world has changed. You were just reflecting on that a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
And maybe we all think that in every era, but I don't know. I think this era in particular has been.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm on the same page with you, because I think and I actually think that there's some statistical proof that technology has evolved society at a much more rapid pace than Ford's original car did, for instance. And it's purely because of the access we all have to the information. And one of the things I was thinking as you were kind of talking about pivoting and being nimble and adapting to what's happening real time, I think just in general, that's a really great piece of advice for anybody out there who is in business to think about. Because if you're, again, it comes back to that like tunnel vision goal. If you are so hard nosed against a goal, you may miss opportunity, but you also may fail to keep up with the times in a way that's critical to the business evolving to meet the need to be able to have that systemic change or whatever impact you're trying to create.
It's true. I feel like everything in life is a balance, right? And so there's a balance between being clear about what your near term or midterm goal is, and at the same time being aware, open, taking in information about the environment, so that as circumstances may change in the environment, you have the opportunity to go back to those plans and say, might I need to make a change? And it doesn't need to be a massive pivot. Maybe it's a small thing, but the world moves so fast right now that if you're not doing that, it's kind of like evolve or die.
I also think that the idea of how incremental change can add up. Inching yourself forward eventually gets you a foot and then feet, whereas trying to go 5 feet all at once may not actually happen. And so being open to how that progress looks, the speed it goes, is all very important. And you're not making progress if you're inching yourself forward.
That's true. I would say that, the mistakes that I have made have been because I have tried to move too quickly. I have been so energized by the mission, right? By trying to actually help improve lives, that you want it to all happen right now. Those are the times I've made my biggest mistakes.
There is a book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich that talks all about having faith and trust in what you're doing and knowing you're doing the right thing in a good way, and that in the long run, the results will come. And you said something a few minutes ago, the word balance came up. And this is a really specific question I thought might be good because you said something earlier in your kind of intro that I wanted to just kind of get your thoughts on. And that is that idea of, as a business owner, whether it's nonprofit or not, balancing mission and margin. So I bring this up because I know there's entrepreneurs out there listening. And for instance, I coach a lot of other career coaches and resume writers who want to grow their businesses, and they struggle. Coaches really specifically struggle with this idea of, I became a coach to serve, but not embracing the business side of it and thinking about the fact that you can be mission-minded and make money at the same time. So what I would say, how have you approached that very delicate balance, especially in a nonprofit? And what advice do you have to others who are maybe trying to figure that out?
I think it is a mindset, first of all. And I also just want to say, I recognize that not everyone works in a context in which that's possible. So if you're like toiling inside large company doesn't really have a purpose, a broader mission, you have a very particular job, then there's opportunities to find ways to do more mission-oriented things outside of your job, right? And that's perfectly okay. But when you have your own business, you really do have the opportunity to infuse your own values into it in a unique way. And listen, everyone's got to eat.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
Right? And this is not suggesting that you should want to make less money or do less well financially for the sake of mission. Now, some people are into that, and that's awesome, right? But, first you've got to make sure you have enough to be able to actually do the job in the first place. So then it's thinking about, well, how could I infuse my values? I'll use the coaching example. Could I make an effort to reach out to communities or to people who really could benefit from coaching, but didn't know there was such a thing, right? Or didn't know how to find one. Could I, once a month or once a quarter, decide I'm going to do a pro bono session for one person who couldn't maybe afford it otherwise? Could I train others off of the books, if you will, so that, other people can then train yet more people who, again, might not have access to me or to my services. I think there's many ways to do it. And ultimately, it's about what's important to you, what's workable for you in your own financial life. I think but I do think that people who are self-employed really have a particularly unique opportunity.
I agree. And I think you hit the nail on the head with, you can't help anybody if you are dead. And you're going to be dead if you're not paying yourself to be able to put food on your table. And so there is an idea of kind of balance there, that you can do good work and get paid for it if you're helping people, giving them the value and generating solutions, and create time for yourself to go do that stuff that feels, whether it's volunteering, whether it's serving an underserved population. You can do good mission-minded work and make money, and then leverage that flexibility to serve like other people who really, really like fill your cup. So I agree that there's a lot of different ways to achieve it. And to kind of go to something you and I were talking about before we started recording, is this idea of taking care of ourselves so that we can serve. So you have to also find this balance within your own self. And you've done some interesting kind of research about like physical health, mental health, even how finance comes into that, taking time off in that whole little world. So let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah. I think there's a very significant connection between financial health and one's physical and mental health. And it's bi-directional. So we all know the example of someone who gets sick or breaks their leg or needs a surgery, and the medical bills themselves really challenge someone's financial health. We all know that medical expenses are the biggest primary form of bankruptcy.
Number one form of bankruptcy. Yep.
But it also goes the other direction. When your financial health is challenged, first of all, you tend to have a lot of stress about it. Right? How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to send my kid to college, et cetera? How am I going to fill the gas tank this week? And that stress is really bad for you physically and mentally. I think we all get how it's bad mentally, but it actually has an impact cellularly on your physical health. And so just having financial stress alone is going to impair your physical health. And then think about someone who's got a chronic illness, like diabetes, as an example. If your financial health is challenged, you may not be able to afford fresh fruits and vegetables or other kinds of food that are better for your diabetic's diet. Or you may really have to make trade-offs between your rent and your insulin. Those are real. Those are real choices that millions and millions of people out there are facing every day. And so you get this pernicious negative spiral, regardless of whether it starts with a financial challenge or a physical or mental challenge. And once you get into that spiral, it can really be very difficult to get out.
So I guess, let's say there's somebody out there listening who's like, oh man, Jennifer just hit my pain point. What is one small step forward to begin breaking the cycle or get out of that spiral?
So I really want to be humble here first and say that for folks who are listening who are really severely challenged, either with their health challenges or with money challenges, like, I feel you. And I'm not a financial coach or a financial planner by training. But I think that in general, for everyone, trying to deal with your medical debt by going and talking to the source of that debt, there's often charity care, other kinds of things that your health provider can actually provide that they should have asked you at the beginning, but didn't. That may be the very first step. And I think the other thing is trying to find work that provides you the benefits that are sufficient to be able to meet your needs. Not everyone has that luxury. I totally understand that. And we're doing a lot of work with employers to make sure they understand that financial health is a big part of their responsibility to their workforce. And whether that's paying folks a living wage, whether that's making sure that they have medical benefits that they can afford, whether that's providing them with financial coaching, like, these are all things that we're working on. So I think that at a micro level, I would really encourage folks in those situations to seek out a financial coach or a financial planner who can help. There are a lot of free resources, nonprofit organizations that do this work. I think one thing that I do, I'm incredibly fortunate. I'm healthy. Financially, I have what I need. But the one thing that I really focus on is, how do I take care of myself to avoid or reduce the stress that I feel, whether it's from work or from everyday life. And I've learned a lot about that by taking a couple of sabbaticals.
Well, and perfect. You went exactly where I was going, because there's this idea of, on one side, if you're not in the financial position that you want to be in, take a step forward, go seek the expertise in order to improve it. And like Jennifer said, there's tons of free resources out there. But on the flip side, if you're like, okay, my financial health is fine, but I am on the brink of burnout and my mental health is suffering, there's also activities you can do there to kind of, I would say, recover, repair, restore. And that's where this idea of this sabbatical kind of comes in, because we were talking about this at the beginning, especially because there's all these preconceived notions that I can't take time off, and what am I going to put on my resume? I can't have a gap. And that I think we've moved into an era where some time off and some attention to your mental health is much more acceptable. I would love to hear a little bit more about how taking that time for yourself has impacted your overall health, well-being, and picture.
So I was fortunate enough to take my first sabbatical a little over 10 years ago. I got 3 months off paid from this job. And at the time, I was living the life of a traditional entrepreneur, maybe a little older than a 20-something. You know, I had, by that point, I had one child at home, but I was working 24/7 and I was really exhausted and burned out. And this is long before COVID. A colleague of mine, really almost like a coach of mine, said, have you ever considered creating a sabbatical policy? You really could use some time off. So she really helped me to think about that. And at the time, my board thought I was crazy. These were a bunch of bankers, like, who gets a sabbatical? A professor? You know,
super traditional employment landscape right there for the financial sector. So yeah, and this was revolutionary for them.
Yeah, they weren't, but you know, God bless them. They went along, and I did not do anything for that 3 months. I didn't travel. I didn't learn a new language. I didn't climb a mountain. I just lived. I read a dozen books, right? I worked out regularly. I redid the closet in my hall. And it helped me remember what it felt like to not be stressed out and not to be working all the time. And literally, I had forgotten. It's all about perspective. And so once you gain that perspective, it's just easier to see things more clearly. So when I went back to work, I immediately started doing things differently, both for myself and for the organization. I stopped working every night, all night. I delegated more. I immediately said, we're going to start closing the office between Christmas and New Year's. Some organizations had already been doing that. I'm like, everyone's already taking that week off anyway. Wouldn't it be beneficial if we all took it off at the same time? Because part of the benefit of being off when others are off is that there's less that you're missing.
You're not missing anything. Exactly.
Right. And I created a sabbatical policy for everyone in the organization. And I started really talking about the importance of sabbatical as a concept. I coached some other people at other organizations who went on to take sabbaticals. It was really fulfilling. And then it was time for me to take my next sabbatical. Our policy is every 8 years. And I had it all planned out, and then COVID hit. So I canceled it, and I finally had the opportunity to take it last year. So I took 2 months off last year, and I spent a portion of that time walking a portion of the Camino de Santiago in Spain, which is an ancient pilgrimage route. So I walked 130 miles in 11 days. And again, it was just this unbelievable experience of starting from the, oh my God, I have to get through this every day, to no. Walking is my only job. This is what I'm here for. Walking isn't something I have to get through. It's what I'm here to do. And, after you kind of get used to it, it becomes like a walking meditation, and you start to realize the beauty around you. You start to notice things you wouldn't have noticed. And, that experience really helped me understand and appreciate the importance of being present. And that's something we all can be working on all the time, every day. So it's not so much that now I'm magically present all the time, but I can catch myself when I am not and reel myself back, like when I'm multitasking on a call and I'm not really paying attention, or those things all take a toll. And so I'm really just focused on this moment right now. Like, we're alive right now. Like, isn't that awesome? We're alive and we're doing this podcast, and that's what we're doing right now. And it's pretty cool.
It's almost like a reset to make you more aware of oh, wait, I'm kind of doing the thing. And I'm curious on how this has bled into the kind of, I would say, greater culture of the organization as you made this a policy. Like what has it done to the workforce?
I think that it helps us retain staff, because when you get to that 5, 6, 7 year mark, where for some people that might be an itchy time, they can see the sabbatical coming. I think that those who take the sabbatical are like unbelievably appreciative and loyal and bring back newfound perspective. And because it's something we talk about as an organization and we really value, like when you have time off, we want you to be unplugged. Like that's the expectation. I think it really helps demonstrate both our value of caring, but also that we really value people as humans. And that even though the work we do is so important, it really is about improving people's lives. At the end of the day, if we're not fresh enough to do that work, we're not doing anyone any good. It's an organization of people who are real strivers. We all want to do our best. We all want to do our best for the community. So it's not easy, right? To always convince people or remind people, but it's something we strive for.
Well, and a lot of times important things aren't necessarily easy, but they're necessary. And I think this is a really interesting kind of full circle conversation around that idea of like, balance is such a kitschy word, work-life balance. But if you really think about it, we don't have it, and it's to our detriment that we don't. And there's a lot of steps you can take, I think, to improve that. And if you're a leader or manager or business owner who has a team, this is like real stuff you could really think about incorporating. And if you're sitting there thinking, oh man, I can't afford to give my staff 2 months off paid, maybe you can't afford not to. Think about how much value you're going to get out of them when they come back. And if you're an employee who has a sabbatical available to you, take it.
Yeah. What we do is we essentially expect people, it's a 3-month sabbatical typically. I was only able to take 2 months last year, but it's typically 3 months. And one of those months is employees using their vacation, and the other 2 months are given to them. So you could imagine something on a smaller scale. Hey, I'll give you a month and you contribute a week of vacation and I'll contribute 3.
Yeah.
Or right, there are lots of ways to do this that don't have to cost as much, can be more realistic given the size of your business and the nature of the work that you're doing there. I would say another real advantage of sabbatical is the cross training that happens. It's one thing when the CEO leaves. It's another when you've got, each year, 1 or 2 people in different parts of the organization who are taken off. And there's a whole process that folks go through to be prepared and for others to be prepared. And that is a huge benefit. When I came back, there are things I just didn't pick up again. And it's true for everybody. And other people feel it's a bench strengthening exercise. It's a training exercise. So I think there are a lot of other benefits to the business.
The cross-training upskilling piece is a really interesting component that I wouldn't have thought of, but it's totally true that now somebody's got to do that stuff for the month that you're gone. And if you can plan that in advance, it really works. And I love this idea that there's like you pushing forward to kind of like innovate in the culture space within an environment or industry connection that really, like, this was totally out of left field. And I'm going to take us on a complete left turn and talk about, you have a podcast where you talk to people who are kind of innovating and doing some cool stuff. So give everybody a shameless plug for that.
I will. It's called Emerge Everywhere. It's been going now for, 2 or 3 years. I've lost track. But I essentially get to interview and talk to innovators across fields who are in some way really focused on trying to improve financial health, whether that's for their employees or their community or their customers. In some way, they're doing something in that arena. And so whether they're executives in HR or financial services or a lot of innovators, fintech innovators I've interviewed, some politicians, some nonprofit leaders. I absolutely adore getting to talk to people about sort of what makes them tick and what they've learned from their experience. And honestly, it's a little bit for me like getting back to my old journalism roots. And it, as much as I am very happy in the work that I do, I will always self-identify inside as a journalist. And so getting to have conversations like the one we're having now are just incredibly, intensely enjoyable for me. I love asking questions. I love learning. And so it really feeds that part of me.
I was thinking when we started and you were talking about your journalist roots that I was like, well, that comes into the podcast because basically you're on the flip side and get to kind of ask everybody why. And just so everybody out there listening knows, we will link to Jennifer's podcast in the show notes. You know, as we kind of start, I can't believe it's already time to wind things down. This went so fast, but I would love to know that in addition to the podcast, how can everybody else out there follow along in your journey and maybe get some of the resources that you're offering to everybody as we kind of make these systemic changes?
Absolutely. So our website is chock full. It's finhealthnetwork.org. Then you can follow me on LinkedIn, Jennifer Tescher. I'm kind of off Twitter. It's sort of a silent protest right now.
I was going to say, I bet you that's a rabbit hole we don't need to go down.
Right. At Jen Tescher, I think is my handle. But yeah, LinkedIn in particular, I've posted quite a bit about my sabbatical and other things like that. So, or just reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, definitely. And Jennifer and I are connected on LinkedIn, so you can go and track her down there. And again, we will link everything in the show notes at nomoremondays.info. And as we kind of close it out, I always love to end this with like one last tidbit of inspiration. So what in your life have you done to kind of combat those Sunday scaries and really embrace this kind of idea of No More Mondays?
For me, it is just remembering that I am alive and that is awesome. And God willing, when I go to bed Sunday night, I'll wake up on Monday and I will also be alive.
And you will be present. Love it.
And I'll be present. And literally, it's not about going to work on Monday. It's about being here on Earth. That's pretty awesome. And so I try to keep that front of mind.
And I think we also lose sight of that as like, oh, I'm here. I'm alive. If you're listening to this, you probably have a roof over your head and clothes on your back and you had breakfast. A lot's you're going your way the minute you wake up on Mondays, and it can be easy to focus on what isn't there or what you don't have instead. And I think that, hey, I woke up this morning, I'm going to be present to whatever comes my way is an amazing kind of idea and perspective to start every day, regardless of whether it's Monday or the other 6.
Exactly.
Jennifer, I love what you're doing. I love that we actually got to hear. So everybody out there, if you've ever said, oh, I'd love to change this big, giant, onerous problem, but I'm only one person. Yeah, go listen to this episode again, because Jennifer's living proof that you can be one person and it might take a while. However, you can create systemic change while finding a way to balance mission and mindfulness and margins and not killing yourself in the process. And so I hope this conversation is an opportunity for you to kind of take stock in where things aren't really aligned in your life and be more present to that and figure out how you fill it and how you fill your own cup. So Jennifer, you gave inspiration across a lot of different areas of life. And I hope everybody out there will take it to heart and do something about it, act on it. And I appreciate you for being here, sharing your story and joining the No More Mondays movement.
I'm in. I'm so excited. Thank you so much. I love the conversation.
Yes. Awesome. Likewise. This has been really just also for me, like, I think a lot of you don't realize, like, I get a lot out of these conversations too. And it always gives me food for thought because we love hearing from people who have navigated their own career crossroads and changes and have a perspective to share that can help others do the same. So I hope all of you took notes, got some inspiration. And for those of you out there listening, I would love for you to subscribe to No More Mondays wherever you get your podcast and leave us a 5-star rating so we can continue to bring sharing these stories. Podcasting is a lot of work, and people like Jennifer and I are committed to it. You liking us and leaving ratings is actually a huge, huge help. If you want to leave comments, feedback, or drop a guest suggestion and grab the notes from today's episode, visit us online at nomoremondays.info, and I will see you next week for another episode of the No More Mondays podcast. Thanks for joining us for another episode of No More Mondays. Tune in next week as we bring you more insights and actions to help you improve your professional life and find career satisfaction. Don't forget, visit us online at nomoremondays.info for all the details, show notes, and recommendations from this episode. No More Mondays, we drop new episodes every Wednesday. No More Mondays is brought to you by Career Benders, Inc. in partnership with executive producer Jane Durkee. For more information about career coaching, resume writing, personal branding, recruiting, and entrepreneurship coaching services, visit our website at careerbenders.com.